Okay, so in the previous video, we looked at how curriculum meetings flow into Board of Trustees meetings and how those meetings allow you to move on and get things moving to the Chancellor's office, and how different meetings are able to hit deadlines for other meeting dates and submission dates. What this video is going to talk about is how curriculum moves into other processes aside from its own review and approval process. So the big gray box in the background is trying to illustrate to you how there's all sorts of curriculum as a whole that has been reviewed. And you see that right around 11.4 that comes to a stop. That means that the gray bar going back in time, way beyond what we can see, basically out to this invisible January over here on the calendar, is going to be in this block that actually needs to be updated in DataTel. So your job as a curriculum specialist is to evaluate all of those proposals that have come through the curriculum committee and make a determination as to how they have affected DataTel course records. In some cases, courses go through curriculum, and while the faculty may have changed something on the course outline, that won't affect DataTel. And one of the finer points of your job is being able to evaluate a course outline and other data that accompanies that course and take action in DataTel by a certain timeline. And that's what this calendar is illustrating, is that 11.4 meeting, or excuse me, that 11.22 meeting, I should actually update that a little bit, move that dot out. That 11.22 meeting shows you that is the last meeting at which the curriculum proposals can take place and actually make it into DataTel. There's a hidden technicality in here, though, that you will need to be cautious of, and your supervisor and Kathy will want to be advised of, is that even though it's being approved here at 11/22/2016, and it's being put in DataTel, it hasn't yet been approved by the Board of Trustees. So this is a very cautious part of your workflow where you're going to want to know that you might be putting in a substantial change into the system, and DataTel will allow you to make that change, but the caveat is that the Board of Trustees hasn't approved it. Now, very seldom does the Board of Trustees not approve curriculum. They ask a lot of questions, but at this time, it's nothing to be worried about, but is it a good practice? And that's, I think, a question that's open for discussion. So all of this curriculum that's been developed, blah, 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 at meetings here and in the past 6 months that are not represented on the calendar, come into this point here where we hit what's called the DataTel roll. The DataTel roll is the point at which District MIS, in cooperation with you, setting up the deadline for that, takes a prior year's schedule and rolls it into being basically a template for the divisions to begin scheduling for the summer and fall terms of 2017. So essentially, you need to make sure that your work from all of this is done by this date. So I would think for yourself, you want to be updating DataTel as to the best of your ability in this window here. You can update DataTel for 2017-18 curriculum after scheduling for spring 2017. No, excuse me, spring 2017, the end of the 16-17 year has come to a close. And that's usually between around, I believe July. I think that's done. But we'll come back to that later. Anyway, so your work in DataTel is going on here. And then that dumps into the roll, at which point down here the divisions begin their scheduling. So you should be hands off the records at that point. So your November is pretty intense, very intense. October, if you want to do yourself a favor, get a jump on it. In October and November, what you're spending time doing is getting proposals ready to submit to the Chancellor's office, checking the Chancellor's office inventory regularly to see if you've had feedback on those proposals, and then working in DataTel and auditing all your curriculum records and what the information available to you in CurricuNet to make sure DataTel is updated. So, moving into another facet is the catalog is in development as well. Now, the reason why I put this darker gray bar here is to illustrate the same concept, is that while DataTel is being updated with curriculum, the catalog is going to be affected by those curriculum changes as well. You're not necessarily actively doing anything for this. You are just knowing that it's evolving with every curriculum meeting. There's something that's going to affect what needs to be done in terms of representing our curriculum in the catalog. After you get through this role is when you can start to turn your focus to the catalog. Now, I happen to be someone who works in InDesign, so I'm able to actually lay out the pages of the publication that are going to go to the printer. You may or may not have that skill, and so it will be between you and Brian and Jared Moss, the graphic designer, to figure out who's going to have what responsibilities. But your responsibility in terms of the catalog is to develop and ensure the technical integrity and accuracy of information that is published in the next catalog. And that ramps up and is at a hearty pace between at the point after the roll all the way up into the time that it goes to print, which is right around early April. So bearing that in mind, as you can see, this sort of comes to a point here, although that may or may not be accurate. In any case, you are producing the catalog from beginning of December to the end of April. And there's a whole calendar that we've developed for that, that you will have a lot more control over, but please know that the catalog production timelines definitely need to be worked out with the articulation officer as well as the co-chair. There are fixed points in their processes that they are going to want to make sure are honored in your calendar and your timelines for that. Back to DataTel, as you can see up here, I've also mapped out the scheduling timeline when they're building sections in the divisions, when those sections are being audited, and then when it goes to EMS and when it's rolled into live. Same thing for scheduling into EMS, and then it's live, meaning when we say live, that it's put out on the web for students to shop and drop classes into. This is the shopping cart here, and the little mouse icon is when they actually can begin to register for those classes. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you're looking at. Up here you can see that the process is now feeding in from the curricular perspective, the curriculum committee, it's feeding into the next year. Okay?